Recently there was a video from the Studio Rats talking about the Warm Audio Klon clone. And that got me remembering, the Pedal Show had done a video back in December where Dan and Mick broke down kind of a Klon circuit and kind of deconstructed it into a bunch of different pedals. And for some reason that triggered in my brain, hey, could we do something along those lines in the Quad Cortex? And kind of the way it ended up is this preset ended up as really a dual amp preset that is kind of mimicking the general structure of a way a Klon works. So, for example, if we bring up the image of kind of a Klon circuit, and I pulled this straight out of a screenshot from Dan and Mick's video. So I'll link to that video in the description. You should go check it out. It's a really fun exercise they went through. And definitely they went through way more depth than I'm going to go into here. But as you can see, basically the Klon is getting broke into three paths. There's a clean path, and then there's a path that's a dirty path, and that dirty path is broken down into kind of a distortion path, and then a clean path that's just for the super low end, like 100 hertz and below. And so that's generally what I've created here. But instead of using kind of distortion and then running it into an amp, what I did is my clean path is a clean amp, and my distorted path is a distorted amp, and we're mixing those together. So let's go through what I've got here and we'll kind of talk through it. So as you can see here, line 1 comes in. We have a little bit of a boost. We'll get to that later. And the first thing we have is our split between the clean path and the dirty path. And our clean path, I've got a compressor here just to smooth out some of the attack, add a little bit of fullness to the clean tone. One thing you'll see, if you start running clean tones and distorted tones in parallel, if you look at the output, what you're going to see is the clean path will hit harder and then drop off in terms of level. And then, a distorted path will have a little more smoothness to the attack, but it'll last longer. So this compressor kind of evens that out just a little bit. And, the original Klon was built to kind of around the tone of Fender amps in general. So here I'm using a super reverb. You can see I've got the volume on 4, basses on 4, trebles on 7, bright switches on. I'm pulling the output back a little bit. And we're running that into a dual IR. I'm running a couple of the free amalgam IRs. I'll put the link to that in the description as well. We got a Fender 2x12 and a Fender with an EB12 speaker. And then I'm running a plate reverb into a delay. And then our second path is heading down to row 3 so we can split again. And that's the dirty path. And the main dirty path, we've got a parametric EQ where we're pulling back at around 400 hertz and pushing the 1K and pulling back a little bit at 2000 and above. So just kind of giving a little bit of a mid hump. Could probably push this even a little bit more, but I didn't want to overdo it. And then what I did is I pulled a capture of a Princeton kind of cranked. This is one of the ones we went through in the cranking Fender amps video. I'll link to it here. And this is one of my favorites from that video, so I used it here. I'm running through the same IR here and actually the same reverb into a delay. And then this other path, what I'm doing is I'm doing a crossover split, and I'm splitting everything below 100 hertz. I had to invert it. So the 100 hertz is heading to the B path. And there I'm doing a little bit of compression just because this is a direct path. There's no amp here. So sometimes the attack on those kind of things can get a little intense. And so I'm compressing that just a little bit. I'm also boosting the volume because there's no amp here to kind of push the volume up. And then when we mix it back together, I'm also pushing the level of that path just to kind of try to get the clean path to be equal with the dirty path. And so that's the general structure. And then what I did is I set up the scenes to basically move on this first splitter, this balance around. And I just set it to numbers. So it's like, a dial on the Klon. So setting it to 0, you get 100% of the clean. So this balances all the way to the A path. And then the different settings just move up the mix between the two paths, the 10 being entirely the dirty path. And then the other thing I did is I threw an RC booster in front of it just to hear how that would do. So we're boosting the 0, we're boosting the halfway, and we're boosting the 10. So let's just go ahead and hear how this sounds. So let's start with the clean. So again, this is just a super reverb clean, volumes on 4. And for this video, I'm using an HSS Strat style guitar, and I'm on the neck pickup. If I go to the bridge humbucker, you can hear maybe it's starting to break a little bit, but it's pretty clean. So let's go ahead and go all the way to the dirty path. And again, we're back on the neck pickup. And if we hit the bridge, so you can hear not tons of gain. You know, this isn't a high gain kind of tone, but there's a good amount of crunch there. And if you were to hit it with hotter pickups, you'd get even more. But if we start mixing those two together, again, what we're doing is we're just shifting this balance on this splitter. The other thing I will mention is the multi-out. I am pulling back the volume of the mixed tones. When you mix 2 amps together, you tend to get a little more volume than the 2 amps on their own. So I'm just pulling back the volume on the output just a little bit. So at 3, so this is 30% the drive, 70% the clean. We go half and half. We go to 70%. And so obviously, you can use whatever split balance setting you want. I set these to kind of have some benchmarks to go by. And then on the up front, I'm just using a RC booster, not too much gain, pulling back a little bit of bass, a little bit of treble, and just using that to add a little bit more to the mix. So if we use the RC against the clean, go to the halfway. And if we do the RC against the full gain. So, like I said, I don't know how practical this is to use. I think there's some good tones here, and definitely you could take this preset and kind of customize it to get maybe a mix between these 2 amps that you like. I do think there's value in having the pure clean, the pure drive, and then mixing them together. I think you get a good range of tones, but maybe you might want to pull a few things out. Like if you got rid of this clean path that's doing this crossover split, you may lose a little bit of clarity on the low end of the gain, but then you could pull the gain line up into line 2. You could share the same IRs, the same reverb, the same delay. So getting rid of that path would free up a lot of CPU and make, I think, this quite a bit more flexible. But I wanted to do that just to, again, it's kind of an academic thing. And I'm pretty happy with the results. So I think there's some interesting things to learn from this, and definitely some techniques in here that you could apply to other presets and do a similar kind of thing. So I thought this was a fun exercise. I hope you enjoyed kind of walking through it. As always, I'll make this preset available on my Cortex Cloud account. The link for that's in the description, and thanks for watching.